Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here with another weekly Star Trek Discovery review and deep dive episode. This week it's episode 8 of the final season, Labyrinths. As always, beware of spoilers. Let's get started with my thoughts on this week's episode. We start with the Breen, and it's pretty apparent that Primarch Rune is only using Locke to advance his own goals. Capture of the progenitor technology and rule of the Breen Imperium. Maul is doing a pretty good job of walking the line between ensuring her own protection via her association with Locke and her ability to help procure the progenitor tech, but Rune is obviously getting tired of catering to what he sees as a lesser life form. Meanwhile, Discovery has arrived at the Badlands, the location of the Eternal Gallery and Archive, home of the final clue. We meet Hyrel, an archivist aboard the library, who guides Discovery through the plasma storms. I really enjoyed her character, with just the right amount of quirkiness to land a little bit of levity to parts of this episode. I also loved the depiction of the archive itself. I would love to own some of those really cool lighted bookshelves, and also I have to say, if I were a citizen of the Star Trek universe, I feel like I would be right at home working at a place like this. It's really nice to see enticing job opportunities in the Trek world that aren't just Starfleet officers and outpost scientists. We see the continuing friction between Book and Burnham playing out in this episode. Last episode, Book objected to Starfleet releasing Maul to the Breen, prompting him to say that this is wrong. If you remember Season 4, a similar sentiment by Book preceded some pretty bad turns for his character, so it's fascinating to hear that phrase repeated here in this episode. It lends a weight to his feelings that makes one really sit up and take notice. Book accompanies Burnham to the archive because, as Hyrel informs them, it houses an artifact from Book's homeworld of Kwejian. Because of its destruction last season, it is one of the last artifacts of that world in existence. I absolutely adored the scene in which Hyrel presents Book with the artifact, which is a cutting from the Kwejian world root. David Ajala is incredible in this scene and turns in an amazing performance. I truly bought his emotions here. Of course, with the world root cutting in combination with the powerful technology that they are chasing this season, my prediction is that we will see a regeneration of Kwejian in some form by the end of the season. Meanwhile, Burnham has found technology within the Labyrinths of the Mind book that causes her to enter a mindscape, in which she must pass a test in order to find the final clue. The environment has taken the form of the library, and her guide the form of Book. I very much enjoyed her attempts to figure out the test, even though the end was fairly predictable. Her continued insistence on trying to figure out some sort of trick to the test reminded me of Captain Janeway's ordeal with the Nichani in the Voyager episode Sacred Ground. In that episode, she undergoes spiritual trials that she continually tries to explain away with science, only to have her attempts fail at every turn. Like Janeway, Burnham is looking for the easy out, a peek behind the curtain that will be a shortcut to the clue. However, she learns by the end that the way to pass the test is to be brutally honest with herself and to be able to confront her own fears and shortcomings. A very typically Star Trek solution. I loved her interactions with the guide in the form of Book as well. David Ajala definitely had fun this week playing this version of the character. The twinkle in his eye as Burnham tries different tactics was really fun to watch. The drama on the Breen ship plays out in some ways predictably, but in others unexpectedly. I really love Eve Harlow as Maul as she navigates each situation, basically trying her damnedest to stay alive. At the end of the episode, when Rune is going to destroy the archive despite the fact that it carries priceless Breen artifacts, he engineers his own undoing with a crew ready to turn on him with just a bit of urging from Maul. It looks as though she's in charge now, which means that things are going to be very interesting over the course of the final 2 episodes. Discovery's ploy to make the Breen think they destroyed her was fun to see play out as well. With both factions now in possession of the location of the progenitor's technology, I'm guessing the final 2 episodes are going to be very tense. Hopefully, with Discovery's damage, the Breen don't get too much of a head start. Definitely a high-stakes episode, and one I really enjoyed. As much as I don't want this series to end, I'm incredibly eager to see where things go in the final episodes, beginning with the penultimate episode next week. This week we had a few Easter eggs and references to Star Trek of days past, including a fun reference to Lower Decks. First up, of course, the Badlands. We see what that area of space looks like currently. We first saw it in Deep Space Nine and later Voyager. It also showed up in DS9's later seasons, looking a little less like typical 90s CGI. It has definitely gotten an upgrade for this episode of Discovery. The Archivist, Hyrel, would appear to be an Afrosian, a species we haven't seen in Star Trek for quite some time. We've seen two previously, in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home as the helmsman of the USS Saratoga, and as the Federation president in Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country. I initially thought that Hyrel might be of the same species as Arctis Baran from the TNG two-parter Gambit from that show's 7th season, but I think that the blue contact lenses point definitively to Afrosian. The idea of being inside a mindscape is a concept that is no stranger to Star Trek. Many episodes have featured being trapped in one's own mind, or the mind of another, trying to find the way out. In this particular instance, mention is made of a nucleonic beam that is tethering Burnham's mind to the program. A nucleonic beam was also the technology used by the Catan probe, as it caused Captain Picard to live out the lifetime of Kamen over the course of 25 minutes, in the classic TNG episode, The Inner Light. As Book is perusing Dr. Derrick's reading list, he notes that she studied Talaxian hairstyles. The Talaxians are from the Delta Quadrant, and the most notable Talaxian in Star Trek is, of course, Neelix, guide, cook, ambassador, and morale officer aboard the USS Voyager. Book also notes that Dr. Derrick's studied Hyperion folktales. Hyperions were most often seen in Star Trek as servants to the elite Ferengi, most notably Mayhardu, Grand Nagus Zek's right-hand man. Jet Reno makes mention of the Hysperians, noting that they really know how to party. This is a rare Star Trek Lower Decks reference. The Hysperians were the, quote, Renfair types, humans who colonized Hysperia, a planet with large dragon-like creatures, and the birthplace of the USS Cerritos' chief engineer, Andy Billups. And finally, one of the newcomers to the bridge, taking Joanna Woshikin's place, is referred to as Commander Jemison. This would seem to be in honor of astronaut Mae Jemison, who has actually been on Star Trek before, with a cameo appearance as Lieutenant Palmer in the TNG episode Second Chances. She was also the first Star Trek actor to actually travel to space. And yes, I will die on this hill. And that is a wrap on my review and deep dive into Labyrinths. Was there anything that I missed? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you as always to the Patreon supporters, and thank you so much to everyone else for watching. Please let me know your thoughts on this episode, as well as predictions for what you think will happen in the final 2 episodes of the series in the comments. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. As always, live long and prosper.